Alright, I'm going to update my standard classes tier list. This is for the Oblivion Remastered. I made one of these for Classic Oblivion, but the game has changed quite a bit due to the leveling system, and so I wanted to redo all of these tier lists. Now, one thing about the standard classes is they're not optimal, so I'm not going to have an S tier. The optimal way to play would be to make a custom class and to make it better. But some people like to RP as one of these, and they have really cool art, and they are really fun. So I'm just going to rank them in terms of which ones I think lead to the most player power and feel the best to play when you actually look at the systems within the game. Before I can go on though, before I start, I think I have to talk about what a class entails. There's a specialization, 2 bonus attributes, and 7 major skills. And the UESP, and a lot of people seem to think that major skills contribute more experience to your level, but I want to really quickly show you that that's not true. Alright, I want to show I'm at 50 block and 50 restoration, and I'm just below level 24 here. I've gained that much experience to 23, so I will quick save, and I will do player.advanced skill restoration 11. That will give me 11 restoration skill. And I want you to see at 11 skill ups, it got me just below gaining a level. I'll do one more skill up, this time advanced restoration skill 1, and it gave me a level. Exactly gave me a level at 62. So 61 was not enough, 62 was. Now let's quick load. So notice we're back to where we were, 50 block, 50 restoration. We're at the exact same point. And now if I do player advanced skill block 11, this is a minor skill. We'll see it got me to the exact same point. I did not gain a level, but I have 61 block. I gained one more skill, and that will gain me a level, that 12 skill. There's clearly not a 12.5% difference in experience gained for major and minor skills. So what these major skills actually do is they level significantly faster than minor skills. In Classic Oblivion, it was a 5/3 multiplier. So I'll just quickly show you this before we start ranking. Let's look at Blade. The Acrobat has a major skill of Blade and specializes in stealth. So if I go to this, Blade, and Blade has a base experience of 0.6 per swing. So you gain 0.6 experience every time you swing your Blade weapon. If you specialize in combat, you multiply that by 4/3, so it'd be 0.8. If it's a major skill, by 5/3, and if you do both, it's 29ths because it's both 4/3 and 5/3. So this would be my experience per swing. So an Acrobat would be gaining 1 Blade experience per swing, and that would change how fast he levels. So right here I have it set to, this is how many swings you need to gain a Blade skill if it's both a major and a specialization. So to get to skill level 100 from 5, which you wouldn't technically start at, it would take over 7,000 blade swings. However, in Acrobat, he does not specialize in combat, so the multiplier would just be the major skill, so that would be E4. So I would change this to a 4, and then we would drag this down to change the whole column here. We've got to get it accurate. And it would take, as you can now see, 10,200 blade swings. So around 3,000 more swings. So even though it's still a major skill, it's quite a bit different. And if we change that one more time, if we had someone trying to be a blade master using blade weapons, not as a combat specialization and not as a major skill, well then we're gaining this 0.6 experience. So it takes 4 swings just to get from level 5 to 6, or I guess 4.8, so 5 swings. And that's 17,000 blade swings. Just to get from 99 to 100, it's 425 attacks before you gain a single point. So the game is not meant for you to get to 100 skills when they are minor skills outside of your specialization. It's obviously possible. You can use trainers. And so these standard class rankings, when I'm talking about the ones that I rank, it's because if you like these skills and these are good skills, well then obviously you want them to be major skills and within your specialization. Otherwise it will take a very, very, very long time to grind them up. With that said, any class can get every skill to 100, every attribute to 100. Take everything I say with a grain of salt. Now that Acrobat is marksman though. And so because of that, he does have stealth specialization and major skill. So he's gaining quite a bit of experience from marksman. And marksman got a buff in the remaster for how much experience it gains from this. So you'll notice these numbers don't exactly match the UESP, but a lot of them changed for the remaster. Every arrow is now giving 2.2 experience if you are for this Acrobat class, because he is a stealth specialization and marksman is a major skill. And so it will only take him, should we sum these up? What is this? This is E7, E101, so we'll say equals the sum of E7 to E101, and it's about 4,600 arrow shots. Now it's going to still take a while, and actually now that I think about it, specialization gives you +5 to skills, so we start at 10, and choosing it as a major gives you +20 to skills, so we're actually going to do E32, but it's not going to make a big difference because you'll start at minimum at this skill. So notice it didn't really make a big difference. It's still 4,300, and that's because these early levels increase so quickly. It's very, very, very fast, and that's why those racial bonuses weren't that important, because you're just skipping these beginning levels. But, you know, it is nice to go from level 30 to level 40, so if those racial bonuses line up with your specialization and your major skills, they can be kind of beneficial. We've been talking enough about this. Let's actually jump into ranking the classes. So the Acrobat itself. The Acrobat is a stealth specialization. He chooses agility and endurance, so clearly this is meant to be a stealthy character with marksman. However, there's no armor skill, and the only benefit to not choosing an armor skill is that you don't have any reduction to your spell effectiveness. If you're not wearing any armor, you have 100% spell effectiveness, which can be really useful for a mage. For an archer, you might as well be wearing light armor, and by late game, by even mid game, 75 light armor, you're going to have no encumbrance from your armor. It's just a benefit to you. It's a skill. Anytime you get hit, your skill will go up. It is a big benefit, especially when you combine that with, he's got blade and block. So this guy's got to get to use some of these skills. He's got to get into melee. So while I think block is very good, it's an S tier skill, these things don't really synergize together. All he really has going for him is stealth, marksman, and sneak. Speechcraft's a waste, security's a waste, and acrobatics could be fun. So that's good too. So stealth, acrobatics, marksman, and sneak. That's not enough to be a very good class though. There's all of this waste and it doesn't synergize very well. You could argue the Acrobat is D tier. I think I'm going to put him in C tier though, just because, we'll say low C tier, just because he does have marksman, sneak, acrobatics, and stealth, and that can be a cohesive build just from that. He doesn't really need anything else. And if somebody does get into melee, blocking will help, especially when you get that high shield bash. The shield bash is now crazy powerful. However, you're not going to be using that with the bow, so I don't know. You could argue Acrobat is D, and I would not argue with you. The Agent, again, we have stealth, agility, personalities instead of endurance, so that's just straight worse than the Acrobat. But we do gain illusion instead of blade. We still have marksman, mercantile. We gain mercantile instead of block. Other than that, though, it's very similar to the Acrobat. The Agent isn't really any different, except now we have illusion. Depending on how you feel about illusion, this could be significantly better than the Acrobat because you can just augment your sneak. I don't think it's very good. You know, without that armor, at least you don't have blade and block, so it feels like it synergizes a little bit better using illusion. I still think this is very bad. Again, you could argue D tier. I'll put it in low C as well. Low C, because I think the D tier classes are even worse. Again, when you get to these bottom classes, it's very easy to argue between the C and D tier, and I'm just not going to spend that much time on them. All right, Archer. I love this class. Combat, agility, strength, armorer, blade, light armor. It's great, except you'll notice he has blade, blunt, hand-to-hand, and marksman. That is 4. Count them, 4 major skills that are all just based on a weapon. And when you look at this, you see how many shots it needs. You don't want to be killing enemies with things that aren't your primary weapon. And he's not going to focus on marksman because he's not stealth specialization. So this guy really should be focusing on either blade or blunt, but you got to pick one. When you make a custom class, you got to pick a way to do damage. And you can combine that with one more. For example, like destruction and blade. Maybe you could do blade and marksman. That can work, but never pick more than 2 forms of damage. And honestly, I think it's best to specialize in one and maybe add destruction because you can just use weakness spells to augment what you're already doing. This class, like all of them, will work just fine. At least it does have light armor, so I think it's above the Acrobat and the Agent. It's almost into B tier because I do like combat. Just simply combat, blade, and armor is great, but without block, without heavy armor, really you're not going to want to be super up in there in the beginning of the game. And it has sneak. So it's like you have sneak and marksman. The Archer doesn't seem to really know what he wants to be. I think he could do pretty good at multiple different things, but not very good at anything. And so because of that, we'll say he's high A tier because he does at least have, unlike these guys, he's got light armor. And combat can be kind of fun as a specialization. Okay, after the Archer, we have the Assassin. Nimble and quiet, they move in darkness to strike at the unsuspecting. So they have intelligence and speed as attributes. The attributes, as you know from the leveling system, aren't that important, but they make a minor difference. +5 is nice. Their specialization is stealth. That will go well with their marksman, their light armor, their sneak, and their acrobatics. They also can use Alchemy, which as just a major, Alchemy levels very quickly. You don't actually need to specialize it as well. So Alchemy, with just a major, is giving 8 experience per potion. And so as you'll notice, these numbers here are assuming you're both major, or sorry, this is just a minor. So 2,000 potions if you don't major in it. But if you do major in it, it's going to go to C4. So it's without the specialization. So you don't really need the magic specialization, because what's going to happen is instead of 2,000 potions, it's already only 1,200, which is much more reasonable. I think you can do this. I think 2,000 potions is very, very grindy. I've had a lot of comments saying, oh, Alchemy's not a very good major skill because I'll just run around farms for less than an hour. You're not making 2,000 potions in less than an hour. I don't believe you, frankly. Maybe you're a psychopath and you can pull that off, but that's 4,000 ingredients. People say they'll wait 3 days for farms. These tier lists are assuming you're doing mostly natural play. You know, you might take 5 minutes here or there to grind something, but I'm not going to grind for an hour. I think that's incredibly boring, and I would never do that. So I think Alchemy is a great major skill because it just gets up fast enough where you don't have to be miserable. So this is actually a pretty cohesive, good build. It could be a stealth archer. I think assassin I'm going to put at low A. And the reason it's going to be a low A and not a high A is because it's still, speed is a weird choice. Granted, it's not picking agility. Obviously, you can't pick luck. So the favorite attributes aren't very good. Not that big of a deal, but it is wasting a major skill slot with security. And I think if you took out security and replaced that with something else, this would become a high A. So that's why it's a low A. Really just that security. I don't know what you'd pick instead. You could pick destruction. You could pick restoration. You could pick just something that would augment the build. Even athletics would bump it up a bit. So bad attributes and security is a pretty big waste. But overall, assassin is a great pick if you're looking for that stealth archer build. Much better than an acrobat or an agent. If you want the stealth archer build, assassin is much better than an acrobat or an agent. Next, we got the barbarian, which I love the concept. This is probably my favorite concept of a character. Speed and athletics. You're meant to be fast, run in there and bash your enemies' heads in. Combat specialization, strength favorite attributes, armorer, athletics. It's got all the combat skills except he's almost just like the warrior, except instead of heavy armor, he picks light armor. And that works just fine. It's not a bad class. The idea is that you move faster and you can sprint faster. And I get that. It's just, I think Feather is not that difficult to get pretty mid-game. So very early, this character will be a lot faster than a warrior would be. But I think by mid-game, where you just have a couple alteration spells, I think that the warrior would work better. And again, it's wasting. It's got blade, blunt, and hand-to-hand. Change one of those to restoration. Change one of those to alteration or alchemy or whatever you want just to help augment this build. While it functions as a decent build, it's just wasting slots with those 3 points. And I do like the theme. It's a fast warrior who comes and bashes your head in. So it's definitely an acceptable build. I'm going to put the barbarian in the B tier. I think that's where he belongs. All right, after our barbarian, we have our bard. Personality and speechcraft. You hate to see it. It's got mercantile, which is not great. I think I remember reading a comment that speechcraft is difficult to level, so choosing it as a major skill is a good thing. You know, if you're trying to get 100 in all skills, sure. But my tier lists are assuming you're trying to play naturally and your goals are to become powerful in combat, complete quests with ease, and have a fun time. Speechcraft doesn't do those things. You can bribe, charm. There's a novice charm spell. If you make a custom charm spell, it costs less than 26 to do 100 charm for 2 seconds. Because it costs less than 26, it does not require any illusion skill at all. It is so easy to do, and he has illusion as a major skill. Speechcraft, I'm not going to keep talking about it every time, but Speechcraft is completely worthless on any character. I would never, ever, ever pick it. It's even worse than security, because maybe you suck at the lockpicking game, and there's some value there. He's got alchemy, blade, block, light armor. That combines for a valid build. But with this stealth specialization, it doesn't really work. Sure, the stealth specialization helps the light armor, but not the blade or block. And without marksman, you really, it's very, very important that your weapon skill matches up with your specialization and is a major skill. That will help it stay ahead of the curve. It will keep you feeling very powerful. If you have stealth specialization and you're relying on a blade, it's just going to level that much slower and you're going to be doing that much less damage. Yes, alchemy can carry you through poison, so it doesn't necessarily matter. But if you want to be more powerful, I would not pick a bard. This is going to be maybe high C tier because this build does function well. Light armor, blade, and block alone. You can augment it with alchemy and illusion. It's not terrible. And mercantile, maybe you'll get rich. So he's at the high C tier, the bard. After the bard, we have a battle mage. A Battlemage, I love this theme as well. The Barbarian and the Battlemage are probably my favorite. He hits you with an axe and then he blows your head off with magic. He's got the magic specialization. He's very similar to the base mage who has all of the magic skills, except he has blade and blunt instead of illusion and restoration. So he's not meant to heal. And I think restoration is pretty powerful. In classic Oblivion, this wasn't so bad because of the way skills worked with helping attributes. Now, with no armor and getting up in melee, it doesn't really function the same way. It almost just feels like this is a worse mage. Because if you do wear armor without choosing it as a major skill, or specializing in combat or stealth if it's light armor, it's going to really hurt your spell effectiveness. And you don't have armorer, so it'll actually take a bit to get up to a point where you can repair it. You don't have blocks, so you're not going to be super defensive, and you don't have combat specialization. So really, you're just going to be relying on your magic, but you wasted 2 of your major skills on blade and blunt, and they could be something different. Again, not terrible, and maybe it's nice with the way mana regen works now too. As you cast, the mana regen pauses, and so you'll want to build that casts a bunch of spells and then does something else for a bit, whether that's shoot a bow, swing a blade, swing an axe, let your mana regen, and then go back to casting those spells. Because if you're constantly casting spells now, kind of like Skyrim, it never regens. Where back in classic Oblivion, your mana was always regenning, no matter whether you were casting or not. You could argue this is high C tier, low B tier. I think either of them would be pretty reasonable. I have a lot in C tier, so I think I'm going to put him in low B, but very reasonably in high C tier. Maybe I'll move him there later. I like my tier list being a little more even. So that's enough to change his tier there. After that, we got a Crusader. Not a very good build in Classic. And again, blade, blunt, and hand-to-hand. Absolutely stupid. Complete waste of 2 major skills. But they do that with almost all of the combat specializations. Attributes are fine. You have a build, though, here. You don't have block, which, blunt and hand-to-hand could become block and maybe alteration, or block and acrobatics, whatever you want. There's lots of options there. Alchemy. Destruction can augment with weakness spells whatever you're doing on your weapon. Restoration can fortify whatever you want it to, so it's great to have. And you could have a 2-handed weapon combined with heavy armor and athletics. Combat specialization. This is a full and complete build that can all synergize well together. Sure, it would be S tier, honestly, if it switched hand-to-hand and blunt with just valuable majors, like Alchemy and Alteration, or, like I said, whatever. Again, that magic regen system favors hybrids like this, so you can easily combine these magic skills with these physical skills. And so I think this guy's very good. I'm going to actually put him in the A tier above the Assassin, because I think this build would work even better than the Assassin. So the Crusader's very good. He's in the A tier. He does waste 2 major skills, and that's annoying, so he's not great. Just like the Assassin wastes his security. There's some stupidity going on there, but great build. You'll have fun playing a Crusader. The Healer. The Healer is just like the Mage. So the Mage is right here. The Mage is magic, intelligence, willpower, all the magic skills. That's the Mage. So we replace intelligence with personality, and we replace, I believe it is mysticism and conjuration with mercantile and speechcraft. Now, mysticism isn't much of a loss. In fact, if you took the Mage and just switched mercantile for mysticism, you'd be fine. But conjuration on a pure mage character who doesn't wear armor, because you're not going to want to for spell effectiveness, is actually a terrible idea. Now, you can use illusion to paralyze or to go invisible to make this build work, but I just feel it's just a mage, but it picked up speechcraft and personality, making it objectively worse than the Mage. And when you have another class right next to you that's just simply better, this is stupid. And I've already talked about speechcraft enough. I'm not going to talk about it again. But that puts the Healer in D tier, just because, maybe there's other classes where there's one that's simply better too, but it's like he's right next to you. I can see it. I can't ignore that. And, that actually brings us into the Knight as well. This is a lot like a warrior. The warrior is combat, strength, endurance, and then all the combat skills. And here we have illusion and speechcraft, and we dropped athletics and armorer. And so it's just worse than the warrior, because armorer is so useful, and obviously endurance is much better than personality. And so the Knight, in the same reason the Healer's terrible, it's just a worse version of the warrior. And the warrior's down here, so it's a little bit harder to see. But armor is really great. Armor is very powerful. At 75, it increases your physical damage by 12.5% and increases all of your armor by 25%. That's a massive boost just from getting a secondary skill up. It's not like you're getting your heavy armor up to 100. It just increases all of it by 25% as soon as you get to 75. And let's look. He has combat specialization, so what's going to happen here is this is going to be C3, and so this is going to take him, instead of taking him to get to 75, or to get to 100, 1,800 skill ups, or hammer hits, it's going to take him 3,000. It takes a lot more. And you can see going from spec to both is not double, but it's a big difference in experience gain every hammer swing, every repair. And so it's very helpful for the knight to pick armor and instead he picks speechcraft, and it's just you hate to see it. And so the knight is also going to go to D tier. It doesn't matter if you rank him above the healer or not. It was really, if you like casters, the healer's better. If you like warriors, the knight's better. So that doesn't really matter. Next, we got the mage. This is the classic archetype. It leans in hard. It's got all the magic skills, its willpower, and magic specialization. And unlike classic Oblivion, you can choose endurance at any time you want to level it up. And you don't have to wear heavy armor. You don't have to repair anything. You could pair this with an Atronach and a mage sign on a high elf. Either one of those. You're going to want a big magical pool. You can use summons for defense. You could brew tons of potions. I would not wear armor on this guy because without combat spec or an armor as a major skill, your spell effectiveness is going to be annoying, but that's okay. You can just blow stuff up. Just make sure if you ever do use a class that doesn't wear any armor, save your wrist irons from the sewers, because the wrist irons are the only clothing gloves, non-armor gloves in the game. And there's one, I think, in the Shivering Isles too, but just save it until you can get a powerful sigil stone. Past level 17 are the best sigil stones. Put it on there, whether it's plus 50 magicka or maybe you want to do a 25% fire shield or something, and that'd be great. But so that's going to put the mage, really, if that's a build you like, it works just fine. I think it's going to go in the A tier. You could argue it's high B tier because it's so limited, but I think just the way magic works in this game, magic is capable of doing anything. I have deep dives on most of these schools, all of them I think except Conjuration, because it's just too much work. They are very versatile. You can unlock things. You can augment how high you can jump and how fast you can run. You can soul trap. You can go invisible. You can blow things up and summon things. There's just anything you want to do in the game, it can be done with magic, and so the mage is great for that. It just takes a lot of work, and you're not wearing armor, so you have a little bit more things you have to do. Next, we have the monk, and at least he has marksman. Otherwise, this would be terrible because he's got hand-to-hand, which is just kind of a waste. I know some of you like hand-to-hand builds, but really, if you do a hand-to-hand build, you got to combine it with destruction, so you're doing damage fatigue or drain fatigue. There's no reason not to. He also doesn't have an armor, again, and on a non-magic character, not having armor is just so stupid. It's not worth it. He even has alteration. It'd be so easy for him to feather it off. He's clearly intended to use alteration to shield himself and then move fast because he has acrobatics and athletics. It just doesn't synergize very well. Pretty much what you have here is you have stealth, marksman, and sneak, and acrobatics. Just like those first two, the agent and the acrobat, and that works well enough together where this is not D tier, but he's pretty much just like the acrobat and the agent. You could put him wherever you want. I'll put him in between them, I guess, because he's the same, but he's C tier. The monk feels just like those guys. Adding hand-to-hand instead of blade is not making him better. I do like alteration a lot, and athletics makes him run faster, so there's some coolness there. So if you really like that monk factor, I would just do a custom class if I was going to be a monk, because doing hand-to-hand builds is already a big enough challenge. You shouldn't add in forcing yourself to do a class like this. Next, we got the Nightblade, and I like the Nightblade. You got light armor, so at least you have a armor thing. An armor major skill. You have destruction, restoration, and alteration, which are very versatile. Alteration can feather away any weight you need, add shield. You can use destruction to add weakness. Maybe you enchanted your blade with fire damage and you cast a weakness to fire spell quickly. You have restoration to heal yourself, to fortify anything you want. You could fortify your magicka. Maybe you're fortifying your speed. You could have one spell that fortifies your speed and athletics and makes you lightning fast. And light armor, you could just zip around and knock people out. Pretty good build overall. I think if it was combat specialization, it would be better. Moving super fast is cool. So if you really like this type of build, it does actually synergize okay together. It really depends on your preference, but I think this is a functional build. Acrobatics and athletics, again, kind of like the monk, he's meant to zip around, but at least this guy has armor and he's got way better ways of dealing damage. Blade and destruction is a pretty solid way to kill your enemies. And with light armor, he can get up into the mix. He'll be just fine with light armor and alteration. So Nightblade, I think, is high B tier. You could argue he's A tier, but I think that having this much focus on speed with acrobatics and athletics, you're just missing out on some things. And the magic specialization doesn't help the blade, doesn't help the light armor, doesn't help acrobatics, doesn't help athletics. So the specialization doesn't really match what you're trying to do, but still a good build. Next we have the Pilgrim, and this almost works because I read Armorer, Block, Blunt, and I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to be an Orc, but then it's Light Armor instead of Heavy, and we have 3 wasted skills, Mercantile, Security, and Speechcraft. And I know Mercantile isn't a total waste, but it's not great if you want to feel powerful. Personality is an attribute, Endurance is fine, and then to make it worse, the worst thing, and the reason this is going in D tier, is it is a Stealth specialization. Block, Blunt, and Armorer can make a build that alone pretty much, especially if you have Heavy Armor. But instead of Heavy Armor, it's got Light Armor, which is a lot worse in this instance because you're not using magic, you're not moving fast. This is not a fast character. There's nothing going on. There's no athletics. There's no speed as an attribute. It's not a fast character. It doesn't choose acrobatics, but you picked Light Armor. And you didn't pick Combat Specialization. With Combat Specialization, this would be a lot better. And these 3 things are basically a waste. You don't even have Marksman. You don't have Sneak. I would say this is D tier. Pilgrim is awful. One of the worst. Probably the worst. I mean, I don't know. You can argue about the worst. I would say the Pilgrim's the worst. If you like it, man. Play whatever you want. Okay, next we got the Rogue. The Rogue is combat, personality, and speed. I think it's kind of a very cool roguish archetype. They use speed in combat rather than brute force. It's not quite like the Thief. Alchemy, athletics, blade block, light armor. Blade block and light armor, you have a build there. Athletics and alchemy. There's a lot of weird things going on here. Personality's garbage. It almost feels like this should work, but again, relying on speed. I like that it's combat specialization, but unlike this guy, he doesn't have armor, where this guy, armor is great. So this guy actually is alchemy. Alchemy, I think, is great and can just carry the rogue alone by itself. It feels kind of weird. Light armor instead of heavy when you are already combat specialization. It's like go combat, go heavy armor, or go stealth and light armor. But if you're stealth and light armor, you need marksman. Your damage should match your specialization. That's why this is bad. His blade or his blunt damage does not match his stealth specialization. At least this guy's blade does match his combat specialization, but then he's light armor and that doesn't match it. So there's just some mismatch there. This is probably low B tier. I would say the Rogue is low B tier. He's not bad, and you could argue, he's better than the Battlemage. Maybe he's better than the Battlemage. I mean, you could really argue about a lot of these. But there's a lot of preference going on here when you're going, if you're just going to change between one tier. But I think these guys are just pretty terrible in the bottom, and these guys are pretty solid at the top. Now we got the Scout. I actually like this one a lot. He's got armor, he's got blade, he's got block. Man, he'd be good if this build was alchemy with heavy armor. It's like a warrior with alchemy and acrobatics would actually be really good. He clearly wants to go faster, and that's why it's light armor. This will function just fine. Block can augment light armor where you will be tanky enough, and that's why the Rogue's actually pretty good too. I think the Scout is going to be low A tier because he's got armor. From the Rogue, we dropped Mercantile, and we got armor. And that's a big difference. Illusion can be kind of nice versus acrobatics. It's kind of meh. We also losing personality for endurance. Endurance is great. Personality's a complete wash. So I think the Scout is A tier. You can argue about where he is again based on your own personal preference. Maybe you love the Mage, so that's at the top. But yeah, so I'm not going to argue too much about where they go on the tier. But Scouts are A tier. Sorcerer. This is the Mage, but instead of illusion, they have heavy armor. That's it. That's the only difference. And, wearing heavy armor will take you out of 100% spell effectiveness. And so that will limit some of your spells. However, at least because you chose it as a major skill, you can get to 50 skill pretty quickly, and that will allow you to have 95% spell effectiveness, which is not that big of a difference. And it'll open up, you won't have to use so much shield enchants or so much shield spells to not die to melee hits. And so the Sorcerer is kind of like the Mage tank. And I think he's actually a little bit better than the Mage. I think the Sorcerer's just, in my opinion, Illusion is not worth it on this type of character. As a magic specialization, you can level Illusion up to whatever you need anyway. It'll be easy, so it's not a big deal. The Spellsword. Magic, alteration, blade block, heavy armor. I love it. This is great. This, in Classic, was by far the best. I think this would arguably be S tier. And in this, I think it still is pretty much S tier. You have these warrior skills. I think this would be perfect and actually be S tier if it was combat specialization. Just because in the remastered Oblivion, it seems easier to level your magic skills than it did in classic Oblivion because they're now based on your base cost of the spell. So if you can cast really expensive spells, you'll gain them really quickly, gain levels. You don't have to spam a bunch of weak spells. So I think the way that this guy would gain a lot of, for example, destruction skill is he would cast a really expensive spell and then get up in there and use his blade block and heavy armor. And so that would gain him a lot of experience. Where if you did that in vanilla Oblivion or classic Oblivion, that would only gain you one spell worth of experience. And so it didn't quite function very well to do that, and now it would. And so I don't know if you need that magic specialization, where it'd be nice to get these skills up really high. Especially without Armorer, it's like, okay, you're going to want to get Armorer up. I think the Spellsword's A, probably the top one, to be honest. So I got a lot in A now, this time. You'll notice this is definitely flipped, where in my classic Oblivion, I had a lot fewer in A and a lot more in D. But Spellsword's great. In both versions of the game, Spellsword's great. Next, we got the Thief. The problem with stealth, again, it's got speechcraft, it's got security, it's got mercantile. There's just a lot of waste. A lot of things you could have that you're not taking. I think he's objectively worse than the Assassin, because the Assassin has, and it's way up there, but it has Alchemy, and the Assassin also has, what did he have? Alchemy and Blade, where this is, speechcraft and mercantile. And Blade now, because it scales with agility, can be pretty good. You can be a stealthy character and you can get that 8 times damage with your daggers. There is a little bit of a bug where if you do a stealth attack shot with your bow and you take out a dagger before it hits, the stealth damage will be times 8 as well because of a dagger. Not super important for this video, but just thought something I'd mention. Just because the Assassin feels better, like period, the Thief's going down a little bit for me. It's not necessarily a bad class at all by any means, but if you want to play that archetype, I think the Assassin's just flat out better. Kind of like the Healer and the Knight. That's a problem with them too. So there's nothing wrong with the Thief. He doesn't actually belong in D tier because he's not bad. If you like that archetype a lot, I think the Assassin is he's just a full step above. It's not even close. Back to the classes. Warrior. This did not work at all in classic Oblivion, and now he definitely does. You have all the combat spells or the combat skills, and you fight. It's not great though. The problem with the Warrior is you're missing out on all the magic within the game, and magic is pretty powerful. And you're wasting. You could drop Blunt in hand-to-hand or Blade in hand-to-hand and get something. And it doesn't matter what. You could get Illusion, you could get Alchemy, you could get Acrobatics, anything. Sneak, maybe you like sneaking. I mean, that wouldn't be very great until late game, but you could get something. And instead he's just wasting 2 skills. That kind of sucks. So because of that, we are going to put him in the B tier. So the Warrior is going to go in the B tier. Last, we have the Witch Hunter. Marksman, but magic specialization. Not a good combo, but it can work because maybe the plan here is to get Marksman to be a tool to paralyze, and really it's your conjuration, destruction that are killing things. So the Marksman is just maybe not so much the damage. It will do some damage, but you're not sneaking, so you're missing out on that. You give your bow a good enchant, maybe a dot, like a damage over time enchant. You poison somebody with this alchemy skill, and then while that's ticking on them, you blow them up with destruction or hide behind your summon. So this one, no armor skill kind of hurts it. You could, when would you level up an armor skill in this? It'd be tricky. So if this build dropped mysticism and security for armor, like light armor or even heavy armor, doesn't matter, or sneak or something, this could be a lot better. Still pretty good. Witch Hunter can work, and you could argue this is A tier just from these things. I have too many in A tier, so I'm going to put him in high B tier. He's great. Witch Hunter, totally valid. In fact, any of these 12 in the A or B tier, I think you'll have a good time playing. Maybe not Battlemage, honestly. We'll do that. Battlemage is going to go to C because it just doesn't make sense to not wear armor. So Battlemage will go to C. I think any of these 11, you will have a great time. They're very valid classes. They work just fine. They're not optimal because a custom class would be optimal, but they can do great. I think that's all I got. Thanks for watching.